We are live for the first time on the Ourlads football channel, and what a great opportunity to not only go live for the first time, but to do it in a sense that, of course, everybody loves at this time of year, mock drafts. So this is a great project, obviously, not only for us, but fans love this concept. And that's why we wanted to put this together and make this our very first live broadcast on Ourlads. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the first round only of the NFL first round, and we're going to do that with our special guest analysts. And let me introduce each one to the scene. First of all, we've got Mr. Jon Cooper. I want to introduce Jon Cooper. He is the longest tenured scout for Ourlads.com. You can't get any longer tenured than that than Dan Shanka. So how's it going, Jon? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, you're right. I've been with Ourlads since 1993, off and on. I mean, I was a college football coach for 30 years and a high school coach 15 years before that. I met Dan Shanka when he was scouting one of our players at Aurora University, and he had a real good running back, and we got to be pretty good friends. And I kept giving him tips on players which weren't very good, and so Dan invited me to the combine, and that's how I got to know Dan. We became very good friends. He saw me every year at the two different schools I was at, and of course he got into with the Eagles and the Redskins and the Chiefs before taking over Ourlads, who I had been working for. I actually introduced him to Tom Hepler, who was the owner and the general manager of Ourlads at the time.
So you're the one that's responsible for Dan Shanka.
Well, yeah, in so many words.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Tom always put an ad in Dan's magazine that he put out with his wife, Peggy. And Tom Hepler is still going strong. I'm sure he's paying attention to what we're doing.
I'm sure he is. All right. Let's also welcome in Dave Syvertsen. Dave and I, of course, you might have watched us as a team last year on my channel, Prime Sports Network. We still have a lot of Ourlads videos there as well. But Dave and I, so we've done a lot of videos together. But this is the first video, I believe, we've done this year. So I'm excited about restarting this relationship up with you, Dave. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, really excited about this. It's going to be a good time tonight. But I started back with Ourlads back in 2013 as the old school depth charts manager for the ACC conference. And when I met Dan a few years later, he told me, he goes, that's like a rite of passage to get into Ourlads, but also in scouting in general, just working your way up from literally the bottom rung and doing all the busy work that at most points, or most people at some point, you get to a point where it's just too much work for not enough gratification. But I'm a process-driven guy, and just every single year from that point forward, going from inserting high school players, height, weight, hometown, updating every single player on every single team, their height, weight every single year, to a point where I started working for the guide, and now I'm in charge of the offensive reports for the scouting for the guide that goes out next week, actually. So it's been a long, fun ride. Really honored and humbled just to be under Jon Cooper and Dan Shanka. I've learned so much from the two of them. I continue to this day. I could listen to those guys talk ball all day, because scouting and evaluating talent to me is all about learning before you try to put out your thoughts.
All right. So can't wait to get this started with you, Dave. And one more to go. And I'm going to introduce Hayden Russell. This is the first time that Hayden and I have ever done a show together. And Hayden's actually pretty new to Ourlads. So Hayden, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Just finishing up my third draft cycle with Ourlads. Time goes by quickly. Started off in the 2021 draft. Needed a little bit more help, and through mutual connections, I was able to connect with Coach Coop, and we were able to make it happen. And have been really blessed and fortunate that I've been able to learn under Dan Shanka, Jon Cooper, and Dave. It's made me such a better talent evaluator. I've also been coaching at the collegiate level for the past 6 seasons, at the Division III level, actually. Wow. And I've really enjoyed my time and loved my time doing that. And like I said, really blessed and fortunate to be a part of this thing.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board, and this is going to be a lot of fun getting to know you in this kind of setting. So we'll find out how smart you are, Hayden. All right. Anyway, enough of the kidding around. Let's go ahead and get started here. First of all, I believe Jon has the first pick. Matter of fact, do we have everybody's name here as far as who has the pick? I can get that myself, but I didn't know if we had that somewhere. But I know John's got the first pick. And you've had a lot of time to think about this, Jon. And I also want to keep this in mind so everybody understands how we're doing this, because you might wonder, well, how are you doing this based on what you think, what we think the team should do? And by the way, there are no trades. So no trades in this draft. I know there's a lot of mock drafts out there with trades. We're not doing any of that. But no, what we're doing is we're going based on what we've heard, what we believe the teams are going to do based on our experience, as well as basically research and so forth. So just so you know, that's the reason, and that is the way that we're going to go ahead and put this draft together. And so, Jon, you've had a lot of time to think about it. Obviously, the big trade pretty much opened up the opportunity for the Bears to go out and take a quarterback, and now it just all depends on whether or not they're going to take the quarterback that everybody believes they're going to take.
Okay, I guess I'm on the clock. Has the clock started? Okay.
You go.
Well, we normally do a mock draft, and we don't do very many of them. We do one for the guide and maybe one or two more, and we usually will do it the way we think it should go. Well, this time we're doing a little different. We're going to use our intel and what we've heard and things like that. And so everything points to the Bears taking Caleb Williams, and he's a tremendously talented quarterback. Ryan Poles has made commentary about him in defense of him. And he's also talked a little bit about the Mahomes. He worked with Kansas City and saw Patrick Mahomes up close. And I'm sure, just speculating, that he sees some of those traits in Caleb Williams, because he makes his plays off platform. And he's tremendous at that, throwing from different arm slots. And he's got some work to do. He makes a lot of big plays, but he throws the ball. He puts the ball into coverage sometimes. He tries to hit windows that aren't open. And he needs to learn to play from the pocket. And I'm sure the Bears feel that they can coach him into being a great pocket quarterback. And then the extemporaneous, as Dan likes to use that term, stuff will come later. And it'll come right away, I'm sure. But that will be a part of his repertoire always. But he's going to have to play from the pocket in the NFL. That's going to be something he's going to have to learn to do. And the talent is there. He's got to learn to take that outlet, the check down, and whatnot. But we think that that's where the Bears are going. And so our first pick is Chicago Bears selecting Caleb Williams from USC, quarterback.
All right. Now I am going to ask you this though, Jon, because, and we're not going to do this on every pick, but this is important because this is the first pick, and you did make sure that you reminded everybody what I just said a little while ago. This is not about what we think. This is about what we believe the Bears or each team is going to do. And I bring this up specifically because there's pretty much a consensus at Ourlads of who the number one quarterback should be. So I have to ask you that. And again, we're not going to do this in every pick, but I will have to ask you on this one. If you were taking the quarterback for the Chicago Bears, who would you pick?
Well, I would pick Jayden Daniels, and it's close. I mean, I understand the desire to have Caleb Williams in your room. And NFL general manager once told me, you never know what you've got in the quarterback until you get him in your room and start working with him. When he's in the building, that's when you start to know. So any one of these guys could be great. Any one of these guys could be a bust. There could be another Mr. Irrelevant that is the top quarterback in this draft. I mean, you just don't know. But we like Jayden Daniels. The metrics that he had for his quarterback rating were tremendous. We see a guy that can put the ball in the bucket on the deep ball. Tremendous ball placement. He can throw guys open in man cover. We think the velocity is good enough, even though some people question it. He's skinny, so that's a negative. He can run. He's fast. He's a playmaker, and that's the guy we like. But we understand Caleb Williams, there may be some potential to do some things that are the off-platform things once he learns the ropes to be a very elite quarterback for a long time. We understand that, and we think it's very close between the two. We just would select Jayden Daniels.
Dave, you're up next, and maybe it's good timing you're up next, because before I ask you to make the pick for Washington. And by the way, I want to remind everybody too, you can go over to, well, you're here already. So while you're here, you could also take a look at some of the other videos while you're watching the show, and take a look at the one specific video that Dave produced regarding Caleb Williams. So I do have to ask you, Dave, before you make your pick, I know you agree regarding Jayden Daniels. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Jayden Daniels is QB1 on our board. It's close. It is a star-studded quarterback group, but we do view Caleb and Jayden as 1A, 1B, and you won't get any kickback from me if anyone that thinks Caleb is the guy. I do think he's the most special talent in the class, but there's more to it. We know that. We see this every year. You can't get drawn in by the highlight reel plays. You got to watch how these guys manage games and how they respond to adversity, and that really, to me, was the separator between Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams. There's just a little bit more unknown with Caleb, and that could be good or bad. But to me, Jayden Daniels, he went up in competition from Pac-12 to SEC, and he got better. And it's not just because, you can't use Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas as detractors from his actual grade, because if you're going to do that, you'd have to say the same thing about Joe Burrow having Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Did Jayden Daniels make the plays that were available, both with his arms and legs at a record rate? And the answer is yes. And he did it after hitting adversity. And when we see quarterbacks bust out at the next level in the wrong direction, that's what I mean by bust. What usually is the cause? And it's the lack of response to adversity. Jayden Daniels took adversity head on and not only responded, but he got better from there. And I trust the dual threat in today's NFL. I do think the fact that he's going to go down easy on contact in the pocket is less important than it was 10, 15 years ago with how much they're protecting the quarterback. And he's just got a very smooth, repeatable throwing motion. And I think he protects the ball a little bit better than Caleb. And that's something I personally value a ton. Caleb with the 33 fumbles, and you could say it's because he's making plays. I looked at it as a lack of care for the football, especially in 2023. And I trust Daniels more in that regard. So Jayden Daniels is the pick for me going to Washington. And this is why I think Cliff Kingsbury left Las Vegas after having a verbal agreement with them. He wants to work with Jayden Daniels in Washington.
So you think that because, for the most part, and this happens all the time, and we still have a few weeks to go, but for the most part, a lot of people had it was Williams, and then it was Daniels, and then Maye, and then it was Daniels.
Yeah.
So you're by picking Daniels here, you're saying that what you're hearing is that's changing, and now that we're getting to more specifics, it's looking like Daniels is going to be the guy.
Yeah, just based on what Cliff Kingsbury has liked in the past, what he has done to engineer his way to the quarterback that he wants to work with, it fits in with the skill set. Now, it didn't work out in Arizona, but I think there were a lot of reasons behind that. And I believe that just based on history and what Kingsbury likes to work with, Jayden's going to be the guy over Drake Maye. But I do think it'll be a close call.
All right, so quarterback. And do we have another quarterback, Hayden? You're up with the New England Patriots.
I'm actually still on the clock here.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
you got
I have
back to back.
Yeah, so
okay.
I have two. Yeah, there's going to be a couple back-to-backs here. We didn't
Okay.
split this up 1, 2, 3. We have our teams kind of spread out.
I'll look out for that now. Okay.
Now with New England, this is a team similar to the Giants picking at 6. The roster is bad, and they are years away from real contention. And the easy answer would be to go quarterback. But I look at the rest of this roster, and I also look at some of the best players that are in this draft. I mean, New England could go in any direction here. They don't need to go quarterback. My question about drafting a quarterback is here. What are you going to do with them in year one? You can't put them on the field on this team. It's awful. And that's how young quarterbacks can get ruined. So if New England has a plan to sit a player on the bench, what quarterback makes sense to do that with? And to me, it's Drake Maye. He really does have the tool set to be a premier pocket passer in the NFL, but there are things he needs to clean up. His tape is actually frustrating to watch because he'll hit three pointers in a row, then he'll miss 2 layups. But a lot of, to me, it's mechanical, the throwing motion, the youth. He doesn't have the experience of a Jayden Daniels or Bo Nix or Michael Penix. But when you're talking about pocket passing, the ability to maneuver within pressure, and the athletic ability and the size, to me, I think that New England's going to run it back with another first-round quarterback here and bring in Drake Maye and have him sit for a year and give this front office another full season and off season to build the nucleus around him. So I'm going to go with Drake Maye to New England at 3.
Who does he remind you of?
Well, I know the popular names are the guys that have recently come into the size, but needed development, and Justin Herbert and Josh Allen. I don't see Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a freakish athlete that can break tackles. I mean, that's part of what makes him a special talent. But to me, there are Justin Herbert vibes in that the arm talent is there, the size is there, but the system around him didn't exactly get the most out of him his final year at Oregon. If you remember back Justin Herbert's last season at Oregon, it was not overly impressive. I don't know if Maye has the same upside, but I could see a similar trajectory in that Maye can, if he gets the right system around him, the right help around him, and this front office takes their time and gets the offensive line talent, improves wide receivers, you could see a Justin Herbert type quarterback, but I'm not sure about caliber.
You know, I was thinking about putting, as you were going go over New England, I was thinking about, well, you know, should I figure out a way to implement the depth chart so everybody can see it on the screen? But then I realized, well, of course, anybody out there, hopefully, of course, if you're able to, just open up another browser and go over to ourlads.com. If you don't already know, the best depth charts in the business. Check it out, and you can follow along with us as we're going through each team. You can check out the up-to-date depth charts, and that's a really good way to do this as we follow along. John, you're next, and so I've got to ask you, do you think Drake Maye is the one quarterback in this? Well, we know Caleb where he's headed, but do you think he's the one quarterback in this group that might – it's possible he might slip?
Yes.
How far?
The simple answer is yes. I don't think he's going to slip out of the first round or anything like that, like the kid last year almost did. I think he's going to more than likely be drafted where he was. But if he is not taken, and one of the teams that needs a quarterback that's looking to trade up doesn't move in that direction with Arizona, then I think he could slip. You know, we don't know, what the Giants are thinking. We don't know what necessarily, but it's a possibility.
All right. Now you've got I definitely wanted to go to you anyway, because you have the next pick. So you have Arizona, and Hayden, you could probably have taken a nap before the show, but we'll get to you in a little bit. You're up, John, with Arizona. So are we done with the quarterbacks now? Can we finally get to some other prospect outside of the QBs?
Yes. I think the Cardinals would probably look to trade this pick. They've got a lot of needs. Especially to a quarterback needy team that might want to move up and get J.J. McCarthy. I don't know if that's on the table or not, but the Cardinals have a lot of needs. The oldest professional football team, the Chicago Cardinals, but the Big Red. But anyway, the thing with the Cardinals is they need defensive back help. They need an edge rusher. But right now those guys are not probably ranked that high, which is why I think they might want to trade down. They also have a need at wide receiver. They've got 3 guys that are decent, that are playing for them right now. Go to our depth chart and check those guys out. And they can probably do well. But this is a draft that has some very elite talent at wide receiver. So I think the Cardinals are going to go in that direction because they'd like to upgrade that room with somebody that's very special that can help Kyler Murray along. And the next guy on our board, and we think that he is the guy that would be selected if the Cardinals keep the pick, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr., an outstanding receiver. I can remember standing on the sidelines with Dan during an Eagles-Colts game watching his dad play. I guess that's dating me a little bit, but tremendous receiver. He's a big, tall kid, had great extension to get the ball, good speed, good route runner, spectacular football player. We think he's probably the best receiver in this draft. So that's the pick for the Cardinals.
Yeah, longtime Arizona fans are going to think back at one of their really great receivers, Larry Fitzgerald. And they're going to go, hey, it's good to have one of those guys back in tow. And I'm sure Kyler Murray is very thankful, too, because just a short while ago, even just last year, the group looked pretty strong. And they built especially when Cliff got there, they were just building stock and receivers left and right. And then, like you said, John, you looked at the depth chart right now, and it's like, where'd everybody go? So I do want to ask you, though, John, your opinion on Michael Wilson, on whether you think Michael Wilson, whether you liked him coming out last year, and if you think he has the ability to be a top end number 2.
If they don't go receiver, that's number 1, in terms of that. And he graded out very well as a receiver last year. He's a decent player. I don't think he's a game changer, but he is a very good receiver. They traded, they lost a couple of good receivers. Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore was more of a special team guy, but still he was a guy, and so they need another receiver in the room.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, next up, finally we get to Hayden. So Hayden, you got the Los Angeles Chargers, the first draft pick with Jim Harbaugh as the head coach. So everybody's waiting for this. What do you think the Chargers do with their first round pick?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of directions that the Chargers could go with this pick. As John had mentioned before, it's very possible that someone could trade up and grab J.J. McCarthy right there at 4. It's very, very possible that this could be the first non-quarterback selected. Now, in a draft where Marvin Harrison Jr. goes at 4 to the Arizona Cardinals, this will still be the second non-quarterback off the board. Like I said, they could go a few different directions here. Offensive tackle is one that I've seen pop up a few times. Joe Alt possibly at this position. Currently, right now, they have Trey Pipkins slated in at right tackle. They could also go with another weapon for Justin Herbert. You have Brock Bowers out of Georgia at tight end. Currently, I believe it's Will Dissly, and there's someone else, I believe, competing for that job right now. Will Dissly's number 1 on their depth chart, according to Ourlads right now. Could also go a receiver. They just drafted Quentin Johnston last year out of TCU in the first round. Very possible that they could double dip here, which is what I think that they're going to do. I have them going with Malik Nabers out of LSU. Now, he's someone that's going to completely change your entire offense. If you need someone that's going to have an element of speed, can stretch the field vertically, he's going to be your guy. If you need someone that's going to have tremendous yards after the catch, he's going to be your guy. I think with Jim Harbaugh's first pick, he's going to want someone that's going to really set the tone for his tenure as the coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, and this for sure is one of those picks.
Give me a percentage that the Chargers trade down.
It will all depend on who's there. If anyone comes and trades up at 4. If someone trades up and takes J.J. McCarthy at 4, maybe a little bit lower. But if J.J. McCarthy's still on the board, I don't want to give an exact percentage, but I think it's very possible that someone could move up and take the pick right there. Jim Harbaugh stocks up on picks.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I'm a Michigan fan, so I've been very close to Harbaugh, and I know what he does as a coach. And I think that I understand the pick would rank pretty high or very high as far as top prospect available on the board. There's a need. Why not? I don't know if it's a Harbaugh kind of move to go wide receiver, but I see exactly what you're saying. Like I said, because prospect, they can use all the help they can get. And I have to ask you too, if you go that route, does that mean that there's still a lot of questions about Quentin Johnston? Because when you draft him, I know it's a different staff, but when you draft a kid like that in the first round, that guy's supposed to be a number 1 guy. So do you think then that that's what you're hearing is that maybe even the new staff isn't so confident that Quentin Johnston can still be the number 1 guy there?
I don't think that necessarily means that. Now, if you go and look at the Chargers depth chart, they're really thin at wide receiver right now. They have 2 guys entering their second year. Like we had talked about Quentin Johnston. They also drafted his teammate last year, Darius Davis, out of TCU as well. And then they have Joshua Palmer. And those are the only 3 guys that have really played meaningful reps for them at wide receiver. So selecting a receiver at number 5, you still have Justin Herbert. He's super young. Giving him another elite weapon to throw to, I think will only benefit their offense.
All right. Dave, you're up next with the New York Giants.
Yeah, so let's break this down. The Daniel Jones new front office storyline. The new front office shows up. It declines his 5th-year option, which is essentially a 1-year tryout for a quarterback. He goes out, doesn't play great, but they do make the playoffs. They do win a road playoff game, and then a couple months later, the Giants, instead of franchising him, they signed him to the biggest contract in franchise history. He goes out, he plays 6 games behind an absolutely horrid situation. Once Andrew Thomas went down, that entire offensive line fell apart. And the Giants led the NFL in sacks allowed by a wide margin. And, Daniel Jones tears his ACL and suffers also his second neck injury. And to me, front offices, if the ego's too big, they're not going to seesaw back and forth. And I believe the Giants have two options here, right? Take J.J. McCarthy or get a bona fide number one wide receiver prospect and punt on the quarterback decision until next year. You let Daniel Jones play out. Maybe he plays himself into a trade. You never know. Or you are probably going to be picking near the top of the draft next year and maybe maneuver your way to a future first-round pick. So I'm actually going to throw a little curveball here and tell the Giants that they need to find that number one receiver, and it's going to be Rome Odunze from Washington.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so another wide receiver off the board. That would make 3 wide receivers off the board in the first 6 picks. What's going on here? Wide receivers getting drafted in the NFL early. But I guess that maybe also tells us a little bit of something what's going on with the NFL. All right, Hayden, you're back. So you've got Tennessee. We've got 3 quarterbacks. We've got 3 wide receivers. We have no offensive linemen yet. And we know there's going to be a ton of offensive linemen drafted. So is that where you're going, or are you going somewhere else?
Absolutely. You're jumping ahead just a little bit. Yes, that is the direction I'm going with. Just to kind of give a precursor into where the Titans are sitting at right now. They started Will Levis somewhere around midway through the season last year, a rookie quarterback. Their offensive line was having a lot of problems, and they didn't have too many weapons out at receiver. Traylon Burks was having some injury issues and things of that sort. They're getting him back. They have DeAndre Hopkins. They just signed Calvin Ridley coming over from Jacksonville. Looks like they're pretty set now at receiver. They fixed up their offensive line in a number of areas. They still have kind of a glaring hole at left tackle right now. So with this pick, we're going to go with Joe Alt. He's the left tackle from Notre Dame. I think this is an easy pick. I haven't heard people talk about Brock Bowers here. I think this is also a potential landing spot for him. They currently have Chig Okonkwo on the roster, and he's a pretty good player. I'm not sure that he would stop them from taking a guy like Brock Bowers, but they definitely need the help at left tackle. Joe Alt, he's been a starter at Notre Dame since his true freshman year. He's agile. He's strong. He checks off every single box that you would want in a franchise left tackle, and I think that's the direction they're going to go with.
Do you think he is, without question, the top offensive lineman in this draft?
I'd go with yes. I would say yes.
Okay. Next up, we're not going to move away. We're going to stay here. Hayden, you've got Atlanta. So which direction do the Falcons go?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have our first edge rusher come off the board here. Now, there's been a number of different edge rushers that could go in this spot right here. I'm going to go with Jared Verse out of Florida State. Some people would argue it should be Dallas Turner out of Alabama, maybe Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. I think Jared Verse, in terms of a true pass rusher, is going to be the most complete player. He has a really polished pass rush plan. He can win with speed and power. His best is actually when he converts from speed to power. He's explosive off the line of scrimmage. He's going to be someone that gets to the quarterback quickly on a regular basis.
All right. John, you're up next with Chicago, and they're going to get with their second pick already. You had their first pick a little bit easier, so now you have a more difficult time with their second pick. And by the way, I want to ask you, John, with those 2 picks that were just made, do you agree as far as Joe Alt is the consensus number 1 lineman, and also is Jared Verse the consensus number 1 edge rusher?
Yes, on both counts.
Okay, you've got Chicago now.
The thing here that I'm not real happy with Hayden and Dave, because they've stolen 2 players that the Bears were going to take with those picks. So and Dave has been doing this to me for 4 years. So it just happens, I mean. But anyway, so the Bears are in a dilemma. They wanted one of those 3 receivers, I'm sure. And, and the edge rusher that I think fit the Bears the best was Verse. Now they've had Dallas Turner in, so he's a guy for them. And the question then is, do the Bears take the very best player available? They could use an offensive tackle here, possibly. Fashanu from Penn State would be a consideration. And here's where I'm going to insert myself a little bit into this, being a defensive guy. The Bears need another edge rusher, and they want to play a rotation with those guys. And they got Sweat, and he's terrific, but they need somebody to go along with him. So I'm going to go with Dallas Turner from Alabama, even though he's a little undersized, more of a 3-4 outside linebacker, but he's a great pass rusher, and he's got a lot of upside still. So I think that will be the pick.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, John. Matter of fact, I interviewed Mark Carman, our insider for the Bears, and Nabers, Odunze, all verse. They were all part of his top pick here. The only one that was left, Turner. So fits perfectly. All right. Next up, we have the New York Jets, and we're going back to you, Hayden.
Yeah, there's a number of directions that the Jets could go here as well. I think it would be really tempting if J.J. McCarthy was still here at 10 to take J.J. McCarthy here. Now, I know that they still have Aaron Rodgers. He's in his 40s, though, so maybe looking in a not in a new direction. They're still going to stick with Aaron Rodgers, but looking towards the future. They also have Tyrod Taylor on the roster. Probably not someone you would want as your long-term starter. In this situation, you still have a playmaker like Brock Bowers still on the board, which is the direction that I think that they would go in. Now, I see Brock Bowers labeled often as a tight end. I wouldn't consider him to necessarily be, quote unquote, just a tight end. He's really just a dynamic playmaker, just as you would consider Travis Kelce to be a dynamic playmaker. He's excellent at separating. He's so tough at the catch point, and he's just going to supply Aaron Rodgers with another weapon in year 20 for him at this point.
Yeah, as a Jet fan, I'll be really happy to have a superstar tight end, prospect like Bowers. I will find it kind of difficult to believe that they don't go offensive line, but if they're going to go with a playmaker with the 3 wide receivers off the board, Bowers makes a lot of sense. Okay, next up, Minnesota. So we go back to Dave. You've got the Vikings. Has it played out for you as far as the board is concerned, Dave?
Yeah, I think Minnesota, I'll go on record saying, that the trade to acquire, be sitting with 11 and 23 with a first rounder in the future intact. I do think that's going to be the one team that makes an aggressive move. And I do believe they'll go after Drake Maye. But I mean, you have to find a partner to dance with. And if New England really wants Drake Maye, which I said earlier, I do think they would opt to take the extra picks to build that foundation. But because we're doing a mock without trades, the trade does not go down. And Minnesota, I do think they're going to be just as happy with J.J. McCarthy. And that's going to be the pick at number 11. He fits in. It's funny how I would compare the arm talent of J.J. McCarthy to a Jared Goff, who Kevin O'Connell worked with in Los Angeles with the Rams. And then they trade for Matthew Stafford, whose arm talent is probably closer to Drake Maye, and they go out and win the Super Bowl. They won with Jared Goff. They won more with Matthew Stafford. But, this team needs an answer at quarterback. And whether they trade up or they wait and sit pretty at 11 and get J.J. McCarthy to fall into their laps, I think they're going to be equally happy because now they still have 23 to play with and their future one.
Where do you have him on your board, on your big board, McCarthy?
Well, McCarthy finished as QB3 for Ourlads. Him and Drake Maye are kind of like that tier below where you would say Jayden and Caleb are 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B would be Maye and McCarthy. If you put a gun to my head, I would pick McCarthy over Maye, but I think the league is going to prefer Maye. We'll see.
Okay. Next up, Hayden, you have the Denver Broncos. So year 2, Sean Payton. I'm sure he'd like a quarterback. Which way are you going to go here, though?
I'm sure he'd love a quarterback. Just got one swooped up the pick before going to the Vikings, which is all right. Still could certainly go with a quarterback. There's still some great ones left on the board. Bo Nix is still on the board. Michael Penix is still on the board. I'm going to go in a different direction. They could definitely use some help in the secondary. I think at corner, they still have Pat Surtain, but opposite of him is still kind of a question mark right now. They still have Damari Mathis, and Damari Mathis could end up being a really good player. I don't think that'll stop them from taking a dynamic playmaker like Terrion Arnold, the cornerback out of Alabama. I think he'll be the first cornerback off the board. Super physical, excellent in man coverage. He's got ball skills, ball production, and I think he's just going to give them, super athletic player. I think he's just going to give them an extra weapon in the defensive backfield.
Well, speaking of stealing a player, Dave, I had a good conversation with Hondo Carpenter, who covers the Raiders, and he talked about Arnold big time as a possible landing spot. Denver, I'm sure they would love to steal the corner from the Raiders. They've done that on our mock. So you have the next 2 picks, but let's start with Las Vegas. Which direction do they go now if Arnold's off the clock?
Yeah, the to echo what Hayden's saying, I mean, the AFC West is going to run through Kansas City for the foreseeable future, and good luck if you're going to try to outscore them. I just don't think the quarterback is the answer, especially quarterback 5 in a draft class. So to me, I think you have to attack Patrick Mahomes with defense, and I like the Arnold pick with Denver. I do think Vegas would be very much in on him if he were available. And now we're left with 2 options. Kenyon Mitchell, the corner from Toledo, who's probably a more physically gifted player. He's checked every box in the pre-draft process at a high level. But I want to throw a little curveball here. And what's the best way to stop a passing game is the pass rush. And I think with Antonio Pierce, his pass with the Giants and what they did with the line of you can never have enough pass rushers. You have Max Crosby. You just signed Christian Wilkins. You have Tyree Wilson, who hopefully will pan out. I'm going to add another pass rusher to this force that will strike fear into any passing game, including Kansas City. And I'm going to give him Laiatu Latu from UCLA.
All right. There you go. We like the curveballs. I do have to ask a quick question regarding Tyree Wilson. He played a lot of defensive tackle last year.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that he's better suited on the edge, or do you think he's going to end up kind of splitting both roles?
I think this is the ideal situation for him. He can play both. I do think as a pass rusher, he has more potential inside. And similar to what the Giants did when Antonio Pierce was there, they put Justin Tuck as a pass rushing defense tackle in certain looks. But you have to have an end to come in and replace him. And that's what Latu can be. So I think most of Tyree Wilson's damage will come from inside.
You're next. You got the Saints. So the Saints, number 14th pick, first round. Which way do they go?
A lot of instability at both tackle spots, not just one. I mean, Trevor Penning can't get on the field after being a first-round pick for 2 years. Those are alarm bells to me. Ryan Ramczyk should be back next year, but there's whispers he might be close to being done, actually. So I'm going to take the tackle that I personally am still very high on. I think he's right there with Joe Alt. I think he needs a little bit more work, but if this kid reaches his ceiling, I mean, he's got all-pro potential. I'm going to go Fashanu, the tackle from Penn State.
Okay, there you go. We have another offensive tackle off the board. Only 2 so far in the first round, but we could still end up with a lot of them before it's said and done. Next up, the Colts. And Hayden, this is your pick. What do you think the Indianapolis Colts do? This is a very big year for the regime, and this is a very big draft too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, like I've said, for a few teams on here, they could go in a few different directions here. Still haven't really found that true elite edge rusher yet. They got a lot of production out of Samson Ebukam last year, who came over in free agency. But outside of him, they haven't really had a whole lot of success. They've had Kwity Paye, who's been off and on. We just haven't seen it consistently yet. They've got Deo Odengbo. We'll see if he can put it together. Could certainly use some help in the secondary as well. They've got 2 young corners right now. Slated in the starting roles. They currently have Dallas Flowers at one spot, and then they have Juju Brents at another. Could certainly also go wide receiver here, add another weapon for Anthony Richardson, your young quarterback. Brian Thomas is still on the board. If you have a talent like Quinyon Mitchell here still on the board, though, I feel like that's the direction you need to go with what you currently have on the depth chart. I had the opportunity to see Quinyon Mitchell in person when I was at the Senior Bowl. Got super fluid hips, incredible athlete. He can play in a bunch of different types of coverages. And I think that he would be the pick in this situation.
Yeah, I think the Colts would be pretty stoked to get Mitchell on their team. So there you go. They get a corner. They need one. He's right there. And he could end up actually the best corner in the draft. But it is the second corner so far taken in our mock draft. Let's go next to the Seattle Seahawks. We go back to John. John's been missing for a while. You're back with Seattle.
Okay, well, the Seahawks, need offensive line help is their number one need. They're going to play same defense the Ravens played, so they like a rotation with those edge rushers. So they're going to look at that position too. But I think the guys that they might be interested in are probably not there, especially with the need they have in the offensive line. They need an inside linebacker in the worst way, but there probably isn't an inside linebacker that fits this particular spot. More of a second round, maybe late first round. There might be a guy. So I think the Seahawks might look to trade, but on the other hand, if they keep that pick, they're going to take a guy that can play guard. That's the number one need. The center need is there too, And, the two guys that I think they would look at, or they would look at Powers, Jackson Powers Johnson. But that's probably a little high for him. We had him in our original mock draft, but and I'm going to go maybe a little off the rails here a little bit, and we're going to take a guy that Dave and I have talked about for a long time that is a good tackle, but he also might be a great fit as a guard, and that's Troy Fashanu. So that's going to be J.C. Latham would be a great tackle pick, but that's not where I think the Seahawks want to be. So I think Fashanu could play tackle maybe later on, but I think they need a guard right now.
All right. Well, they hit it with a Pac-12 tackle a couple of years ago. They go back to the Pac-12 once again and stay in state with a Washington. So they have a Washington and a Washington State player, maybe playing side by side. That could be interesting. Next up is Jacksonville. And Hayden, we're back to you. So Jacksonville is next up. What do you think they do with this spot?
Yeah, I think they're going to take a look at the secondary. Feel like that's a spot that they continue to need to improve on. For our lads grades, our top available player right now, and I'm not sure if I'll get love or hate for this pick, would be Cooper DeJean. He's a cornerback out of Iowa. I think he's really incredible player, very physical, can play press man, can play catch man. I know a few people have said he's got some hip tightness, It's certainly there, but I don't feel like it'll hinder them from taking him right here at 17. Certainly going to be an excellent player in zone coverage as well, can play a variety of coverages. If he doesn't pan out at corner, or let's say you have a weakness maybe at safety as well, he has the versatility, the physicality, he's got long arms, the tackling ability to go back and play safety as well. And if nothing else, you get an excellent return man at the end of the day. So going to go with Cooper DeJean right here.
Yeah, he's going to be a fan favorite, no question. Wherever he goes, fans are going to love this kid. So, today's day in the NFL, contracts and such, you want players that can play multiple roles, and he's as good as it gets in this draft. Next up is Cincinnati, and we go back to you, John. The Bengals. What do you think they do here?
Tough call. The Bengals had one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year. So they need help there for sure. They need help in the interior defensive line in particular. But they also need a right tackle. A tackle is a need for them, as well. So it's kind of a toss up there as far as which one you take. They have some players at both spots, but I think the way we've got these guys rated, I think I'm going to go with J.C. Latham from Alabama because he's our next guy as far as ranking. So it's an offensive tackle from Alabama. Solid football player and would fit with Cincinnati very well. Got to protect Joe Burrow. You don't want him running for his life.
I know. Really tough idea, right? But for some reason, Cincinnati is the one thing that they just, haven't figured out yet. Okay, next up, the L.A. Rams. And Dave, back to you. You've got the Rams. We kind of joked about their roster last year at this time. Because half the depth chart wasn't even filled, but they still found a way to have a successful season and make it to the postseason. So what do you think they do here to get better? Because they had a really good draft last year.
It does. I mean, the Rams seem to be playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. I mean, every year they're getting criticized for not having first-round picks, right? And then, trading them for future assets or for veterans, and it worked out for them. And they were the surprise team to me. Them and the Bucs were the two surprises of the NFL to me. And at some point, you kind of have to trust the system. You have to trust the decision makers. And these guys, they are risk takers. And here they are sitting at 19. Part of me wants me to give them a quarterback here and just kind of set up the future for when Matthew Stafford's done. But I'm going to go in another direction here. And I'm going to the theme of the offseason to me is making this offensive line more bulletproof, making it more powerful, and better at just simply mauling guys at the point of attack. And I come down to a couple of different tackles, and I'm going to go with the tackle that is probably the biggest risk in this class, but also has the highest ceiling. And that is Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, who does not have a lot of starting experience, but we are talking about tools that come around once every now and then. He played in the SEC. His tape is impressive, both against Ohio State and the SEC conference. The durability, lack of, does concern me a little bit at a guy this size. The last time I said this about a big guy was Mekhi Becton. Has not worked out for the Jets, but very different body type, and we're not talking about back and neck and knee issues. So Amarius Mims is a guy that, maybe doesn't play right away, but eventually could settle into one of these 2 tackle spots and give this offensive line an outlook that is just almost impossible to beat.
Okay. Yeah. Anything that Les Snead touches at this point in the draft. Okay. That's fine with me. I'm sure he's going to turn out to be a good football player. All right. Next up is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So John, back to you. What do you think they're doing here? Do they have some questions or do they zero in on one particular spot?
Well, they've got needs. Wide receiver is a need for them. Offensive line is a need for them. They've got a lot of things that they probably want to do. But, getting a playmaker at receiver, I think, would be their priority at this point. So I'm going to go with Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, the wide receiver. And, he's a big kid. He runs well. He was part of a great duo of receivers at LSU that Jayden Daniels was throwing to at LSU. Really solid football player. And, I think the Steelers, if he was there, they would be delighted to make that pick.
Okay, another receiver off the board, the first one since we had that run of 3 receivers in the first 6 of this draft. So back to wide receiver with Brian Thomas Jr. to the Steelers. 21, Miami. Dave, you're up.
Really tempted to give Xavier Worthy to the Dolphins just because of who's running that offense, and they know what to do with speed better than any team. But I'm going to go elsewhere because this defense, because of the way the Dolphins want to play football, they're going to get into a lot of shootouts, and they do. They have Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb on the outside. Both are rehabbing injuries, and you want to hedge that a little bit. They also lost Christian Wilkins from the inside, and I'm looking at the Ourlads depth charts right now. I mean, they replaced him with Benito Jones, Neville Gallimore, and Davion Nixon. I mean, these guys wouldn't make half the teams in the league. And we have the 2 premier interior pass rushers available to the Dolphins right now. So it's going to be their pick between Newton and Byron Murphy. And I think they're going to go with Jer'Zhan Newton from Illinois. I personally would probably lean towards Byron Murphy, but I think Jer'Zhan Newton brings a little bit more playmaking ability and a little bit more pass rush potential, where Murphy can disappear at times. And they both have length issues, but the get off and the versatility that Newton brings to the table, he can line up all over the front and just be a matchup nightmare. So I'm going to stick with Jer'Zhan Newton to kind of help rebuild that pass rush with the loss of Christian Wilkins to the Raiders.
Okay. Next is Philadelphia and the Eagles. We go back to John. So the Eagles, after a crazy season defending their NFC championship last year, they've maintained their head coach, make some changes, offense and defense. So there's a lot of questions there regarding those specific changes. So you've done your homework. What do you think they're going to do here?
Well, they need a corner in the worst way, and they've got a tough call there as far as which one of those guys they might take. And going back to the defensive tackles, I was thinking about Newton for Cincinnati, because one of the trends in football these days is you want guys close to the ball that can get off the ball. That's one of the things. Everybody wants Jones from Kansas City. They want Matabike from the Ravens. So having somebody that can do that is I think is pretty important. And so that was a great pick. And Murphy would have been a good pick too. But anyway, Philadelphia needs a corner. And that's the prime need. You got 2 guys sitting there that are very good. And you could flip the top 5 corners, I think, in this draft. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised. So the guy that I think Philly would go with would be, and it's really tough between him and Wiggins. They want a little toughness, and that's the one thing Wiggins is not. He's not a guy that has a lot of toughness. He's a great cover guy. I've seen games where quarterbacks would not throw in his direction because he's that good a cover guy. So it just depends on what you want. I know some coaches that would not like Wiggins for that reason. Some would say, hey, forget it. That's the guy we want. But Kool-Aid McKinstry is a very good combination of of all those things. He doesn't have the greatest ball skills, but he's a guy that we've always liked. He didn't have the greatest season. He's also a very, very good punt returner and kick returner. Didn't show it so much this year, but he did a year ago. And so I'm going to go with, for the Eagles, Kool-Aid McKinstry. And if Tom's watching, I hope that's okay. Tom's an Eagles fan.
All right. We'll see what Tom has to say. Next up, Minnesota, their second pick of the first round. Dave, you went with J.J. McCarthy at pick number 11. So they get their quarterback. They can also use a couple of players up front on defense, and they've got some issues at offensive guard. You go either one of those spots, or do you got something else in mind?
Yeah, I mean, a personal rule of mine, and I think the teams that do it right, objective number one after you bring in a new quarterback that you're going to hopefully ride into the future is you have to protect them. And, you know, they do have a couple of really solid young offensive tackles. You have to feel safe, but this team saw an immense amount of pressure coming from the inside. And there are a couple of real credible, good value options here. And where they go with center Garrett Bradbury in the future is unknown. Ed Ingram has been a revolving door at right guard as a pass protector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top interior offensive lineman in this class, Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, and just figure out what we're going to do with him after he gets into the building. He played guard, center, and even some defensive tackle there. And his performance at the Senior Bowl, I remember talking to Hayden about him and a couple other guys. I mean, he was the best football player there in terms of just dominating the opponents. Maybe not the best position of value, but this really does match value with need. And it also just feeds into that idea, the concept that when you draft a quarterback, objective A, B, and C is to protect him and put playmakers around him. And that kind of feeds into that system.
I've had a lot of pre-draft interviews with analysts, and the one name that keeps popping up is Powers Johnson.
Yeah.
Because of his versatility and the needs on offense. So find it interesting that a player who's supposed to go in the latter half of the first round keeps getting brought up on a lot of these draft preview interviews. Okay, you're still here, Dave, with the Dallas Cowboys. So Dallas, big name, big team, a lot of fans, want a playoff win. Can they get it? And if so, can this player that you draft help them accomplish that first goal? So what do you think? What are they going to do here?
Create a fire. That's what we're going to do here. Dallas, they chose already that Dak Prescott's not going to be the future. This is going to be his last year in Dallas. He'll be playing elsewhere. We are seeing two quarterbacks drop into the 20s that some are maybe saying that could be top 15 picks. And I'm going to go with the one that has the best arm talent, the one with the best playmaking ability, the one that's going to put fans in the seats, which we know Jerry Jones might actually care about that more than winning. I'm going with Michael Penix, quarterback from Washington.
Do you think, with all the trades that will go down in the draft, do you think it's going to take this long to get to Penix?
His situation is so unique because I do think his pure arm talent, if that's the only thing you're evaluating, is up there with everyone in this draft class. And, you know, I think there's a lot to work on. The durability absolutely concerns me. I know everyone's going to say he hasn't missed a game in 2 years, but he also hasn't been touched in 2 years. So there's a concern to me about it. It's really going to be a coin flip. But, you know, you put a gun to my head, I think he'll be off the board before this, just via the trade market and some of this like late love that he's getting leading up to the draft. But it's going to be a team that really needs the right system around him, pass protection, wide receivers. He's not going to be the guy that just elevates the room around him. He's going to have protection and help at receiver. And Dallas is a pretty good spot. They're good at building offensive lines. They have some talent there already. A couple guys they need to replace, obviously, but they got CeeDee Lamb, an all-pro wide receiver. And, I think it's a good situation for him to go into. Let him learn the system for a year, give the front office another season to build the offensive line and maybe add a complement at wide receiver or tight end. And now you roll with him in 2025. But this would definitely be very newsworthy in Dallas. And I think a lot of fans won't like it. But to me, I think Dallas already made their decision on what their long-term decision is at quarterback.
Well, that would be interesting to see how Dak Prescott would handle that with all the press probably asking him tons of questions regarding that. So we'll see. Before we get to John, because you have the matter of fact, John, not only do you have the Packers, but I believe you have 3 of the next 4 picks. So you're going to be busy here. We had one of our viewers comment, Jonathan Studios. Is that Ohio State Buckeye coach Jon Cooper? So we have to answer the question. Is that you, John?
No, it's not, but I have been mistaken for him many times, not because I look like him necessarily, but I got to tell a story. You shouldn't have done it, but I got on a plane one time along with the Senior Bowl, and the Cincinnati Bengals staff and scouts were all on the plane, and Jon Cooper was working for the Bengals at the time, and the defensive coordinator is a good friend of mine, Chuck Bresnahan. And Jon Cooper was sitting in my seat, and I had met him before, and there's many stories. But anyway, and so the stewardess, moved over and said, "Hey, Mr. Cooper, this is another Mr. Cooper, and this is actually his seat." And Chuck Bresnahan in the back of just about 3 rows back yelled out, "Get that fraud out of here!" Ooh. So John was, we were both a little embarrassed, and that was Chuck. But anyway.
Was that around the time of what did they have, like a losing streak against Michigan? Was that around that time?
No, he was coaching. He was working for the Bengals. He was retired from Ohio State, and he was working for the Bengals. But he coached the Shrine Bowl one year, and we were out there with Tom Hepler. I kept getting calls from agents thinking I was, Jon Cooper. So I've run into that before.
All right. Well,
no, I'm not. It's Jon.
Yes, there you go. All right, next up, Green Bay Packers, John. So what's the direction here?
Well, it's Powers Johnson would have been a consideration. I really considered him from Seattle too. So it's another one been stolen from me. But because the Packers need help in the offensive line, but it's more interior than the tackle position. So the Packers also have need in the secondary, and I think their biggest need is at safety. And I don't know that there's a bona fide first-round safety, but we've got Tyler Nubin rated as a first-round safety, and I believe that he's the best one in this draft, and having watched him play. And I think Green Bay, with what's on the board right now, would lean in that direction because there's not a lot of safeties in this draft. The edge is a consideration. The Packers are going to a 4-3, so they're going to be looking for a 4-3 style edge rusher, and Trap Robinson would be a consideration, I believe. But I'm going to go with Tyler Nubin, the safety from Minnesota.
Okay, yeah, great point, by the way, for anybody outside of Green Bay who isn't aware of this. But with new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley there, they are going to be moving over to a 4-3, and they've been playing 3-4 at Green Bay since 2008. That is a very long time. But Hafley comes in, who, by the way, is an excellent defensive backs coach. So that would also make a lot of sense to go along the lines there of drafting a defensive back first.
Well, the thing there is with the 4-3, they're playing it in a nickel already. So it's not like the 4-man line is foreign to them, but it takes away a lot of the things that some of those, Rashawn Gary, it's a perfect fit for.
Yeah.
So it actually makes a lot of sense to make that move. So I think, they're going to get another edge rusher in the draft to be a part of that rotation.
Okay, next up, Tampa Bay, the Bucs. Dave, you're on the clock. They're on the clock.
Yeah, there's a name that's sticking out to me, although I do think they could go edge rusher here, Chop Robinson, and just give another pass rush option to that front. But they have put a lot of recent resources into up front and not enough on the outside. So the one cornerback that's just standing out to me is Nate Wiggins from Clemson. Just a really good combination of height, length, speed, playmaking ability. He is a little light. That does concern me. But Tampa Bay has overlooked that in the past. They need speed on the outside. They've lost a lot of talent out there, and the names, looking at the Ourlads depth chart right now, I mean, what they have at corner right now, it's plain and simple. It's not good enough. And Wiggins immediately becomes maybe the best or second best corner on that team. Maybe not ready immediately, but you look at some of his best tape against his best competition. The guy can play. He really can run. It's just going to come down to durability and him cleaning up some of the techniques of the position. But Todd Bowles has had success with guys like this in the past with all of his stops. So that's the pick for me. Nate Wiggins goes to corner to Tampa Bay.
Okay, Arizona. And John, we're back to you. What do you think? Cardinals 27.
It's kind of a tough call, in a lot of ways for them. But I think they'll be very happy, the fact that Chop Robinson is still there, because they do need some help on the edge. They could also use an interior. I think it'd be very close between Murphy and Chop Robinson as far as who they would take. I think Murphy is another solid inside pass rusher, quick off the ball, great player. But I think Chop Robinson's upside as an edge rusher is, I think, sky's the limit. I mean, you watch him play, there's times where he's out of control. There's times where he's running an inside stunt and he's in the, he gets washed out in the gap. So he's got some work to do, but the first step is absolutely phenomenal. He's quick at the snap. He can chase. He's very physical. He's got more power than you might think. He needs some refinement and technique. But I think you may have one of the best edge rushers in this draft if those kinds of things can be cleaned up. Solid football player.
All right.
Potentially.
The Buffalo Bills are next, John, and they made the big news of the last couple of days by trading Diggs. So there's a big hole at wide receiver, and this is a very strong, deep receiver class. Do they go receiver here, or do they go somewhere else?
They go, and I'm going to go receiver with them. And I was thinking along those lines even before this happened, but because we knew Diggs was probably not long for the Bills. But the guy that has really been impressive, in drills, as far as his pro day workout, which you got to be careful of those kind of things. But he showed speed, and he's a very polished receiver as far as route running, and a little bit underrated. But I think he's a first-round talent, and I know Worthy would be somebody that people would really look at because of the 40. But not that far behind is Lad McConkey. So wow. I'm going to go with McConkey for the Bills.
Okay, Lad McConkey just seems like one of those dependable wide receivers that is going to have a long career in the NFL. All right. And that's Josh Allen can, like you said, even if Diggs was there, he needs more weapons. And now he's got one, a much younger one. All right. Next up, the Detroit Lions. Hayden, this is your last go at it. And the Lions are picking 29. This is foreign territory for Lions fans to have to wait all the way to the end of the first round. So where are they going to go to try to get over the hump and into that first Super Bowl?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. They could definitely use some help in the trenches, use some help in the secondary. Definitely need an edge rusher. Not sure if that's the direction that they'll go here. Someone, when I was watching the tape, that I thought really stood out as a Dan Campbell type of guy, and he's not afraid to take shots. If he wants Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round, he'll take Jahmyr Gibbs. If he wants Jack Campbell in the first round, he's going to take Jack Campbell. This is going to be another cornerback that I really feel like is going to be a Dan Campbell type guy. That's TJ Tampa, which might come as a surprise to some, but he's super physical. He's super physical. He's a solid athlete. I think he's going to need a little bit work in man coverage, but I think that can be fixed. Starting off early, he's going to be an excellent zone coverage type cornerback, and I think he's someone that's really going to improve their franchise.
Yeah, they need a shutdown corner, that's for sure. And maybe this is a guy that can be that for the Detroit Lions. They have all sorts of secondary issues for years, and they could really use somebody to come on and kind of, be the beginning of the new era back there in that secondary. So Branch was a big-time draft pick last year. Maybe they'll hit it again with TJ Tampa in this draft. All right, next up, Baltimore. And John, you've got two of the last three picks, starting with the Ravens at 30.
Well, the Ravens have a lot of, some things that they need to do, but I think their biggest issue is in the offensive line. They've got Ronnie Stanley, who's injured a lot, but he's back for another year. They picked up a guy that can help them at left tackle. They've also traded Moses. So they've got Falele as the right tackle. I'm not 100% convinced they think he's the guy there. So and they need help at guard too. It's a huge issue for them, in terms of, because they've lost 2 starting guards, a tackle, and so they need to. They've got guys, but they still need to address it. So the guy that I think fits them, and I'm kind of surprised he's still there, is Talise Fuagwa from Oregon State. He could kick inside the guard if need be, but also he was a very good right tackle, very productive player. And, he could be the guy that could stick in there. And again, even if he's not right away, they're going to need to address their offensive line needs. He could potentially, play inside at guard. So, receiver would be a really big consideration for them at that spot. They'd like to, upgrade, their depth there. They've got 3 guys that they like. Bateman is a little questionable. So, one of those receivers they could take. I'm not sure Worthy would be, a guy they'd consider. I think they would McConkey and maybe Worthy. An edge rusher, they would like another edge rusher, but I really think they're sold on trying to get somebody like Van Noy, back in the fold. They want a veteran because they're very, very young in that room with the edge rushers. And they're talented, but they're young, so a veteran presence would be good. So that's why I'm going to go with the tackle for the Ravens.
Okay. San Francisco is up, and the Niners were just seconds away from a Super Bowl. So just like everybody else, they got to start all over again. Pick number 31, first round. Dave, your last pick. What are they going to do here?
Yeah, to echo John, I mean, we get to the end of the first round and you're looking at the list of names still available and you're saying, wow, I'm surprised he's still there. But this happens every year. This is what day 2 is all about. There you have a bunch of first round caliber guys available once the day 2 starts. So, I look at San Francisco and I want to go in one of 3 directions, and I see a credible prospect at all 3. Part of me wants to go Byron Murphy here because they love the quick pass rush. They do have a hole inside, but I'm not sure he fits with what they look for from a size and length perspective. I also like the Graham Barton, a versatile offensive lineman that can play any of the interior spots. I think there's questions all over the place in front of Brock Purdy, but I'm not sure how much longer Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel duo is going to be there. I could see if there's one player I could see getting drafted between now and the season, it's one of those 2. I just don't think there's enough room for him. And there's one wide receiver to me that if he hits his ceiling, he could be the top receiver in this draft. And that's Adonai Mitchell from Texas. This is a guy that just has unbelievable body control, and it shows up both as a route runner and when he's in contested situations going for that jump ball near the end zone. And I think that's something that Brock Purdy is going to need in the future. There are issues I have with his obvious lack of consistent effort. I do think that there are some concentration drops on tape that kind of feed into that. Hey, where is he mentally? But this is a team. This is a system where I think they can afford to bring in a player like that, someone that has all the talent in the world. I mean, his workout in Indianapolis was one of the most impressive things. I think it's top 5 all time when you're combining all metrics combined together: size, explosion, agility, speed. And he has more than enough talent. He was a big-time player at Georgia and Texas. It was not a one-year wonder. So I'm going to go with Adonai Mitchell to eventually replace one of those guys, maybe as soon as 2024 if they end up trading.
I will say this: if the kid from Oregon State was still on the board and he did go to Baltimore, San Francisco would be real angry because they desperately need some offensive tackle help. No question about it. And by the way, tight end could be interesting because Detroit just matched to the offer sheet to Brock Wright, and they need another tight end. They got 2 rookies that didn't have any playing time last year. That's why they went ahead and gave Wright the offer sheet. So tight end is also something to keep an eye on. But yeah, wide receiver, we'll see if Brock Purdy gets another weapon there, and we'll see if Ayuk gets the contract extension. All right, to wrap it up, we're going back to you, John, with the defending Super Bowl champions, back-to-back Chiefs.
Well, the Chiefs need offensive line help. They need a tackle. They need somebody that's got a little versatility. They could use another pass rusher. They're always looking for those guys. And they're the wide receiver room, even though they got Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. They could still address that. So, but just in looking at it, we had, I think, 8 tackles going our earlier mock draft. And one of those guys is still sitting there. So, and I think he's got some versatility that I think Kansas City would like, and that's Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. And I think he would make a good pick for them in the latter part of in the late first round. Good year for tackles, but the depth does fall off. So I think you got to strike while the iron's hot.
As we wrap this up, there was a Barton, right? Who was the offensive lineman that the Niners had? The Barton. Remember, who was that, John? They had that Barton guy way back in, like, I think it was the Walsh days.
When?
I don't know if there's any relation to him. Barton, Barton.
Oh, Barton?
Yeah, I forget what his offensive lineman for the Niners. I forget who it was. But I'll have to remember that. Anyway, I want to ask you guys this as we wrap it up. Was there a player that you think in our mock, was there a player that you think dropped the most that you just don't see landing that far in the draft, in the NFL draft? Hayden, we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. We see it every year where there's always going to be a player that falls out of the first round that you're thinking he's a bona fide first round guy. There's no way he falls out of the first round. Happens every single year. He's in the second round. He's in the third round. Definitely Byron Murphy is one that stands out to me. I'd say he's arguably even the first defensive tackle off the board, and maybe even the best pass rushing interior defensive lineman in this draft. So a little surprised that he didn't get picked, but sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles.
All right. Dave, what did you notice?
Yeah, I mean, the guy that is available that I'm most surprised is Byron Murphy as well, but I would say Graham Barton at number 2, just because there as many teams as that they need offensive tackle help, there are an equal amount of teams that need interior help. And Graham Barton, I love that he really does project to any spot. He can play tackle. I think he wants a shot at playing tackle, but he did play center early in his career. He was going to play center at the Senior Bowl, but he backed out because of injury last minute. And obviously I'm projecting him to guard. He can play any of those spots, and that kind of versatility, man. I mean, if Dallas doesn't go Michael Penix, which, I threw a curveball out there, I think that would be a nice spot for him, because Tyler Smith is likely going to get pushed to left tackle, and that just opens a huge door at left guard. They have multiple spots open for competition, and Graham Barton is that ideal guy that can fill in multiple spots based on who else shows out in training camp.
By the way, the player was Graham Barton, 2-time All-Pro, played 11 seasons for the 49ers, winning 3 Super Bowls. So I don't know if there's any relation, but I just thought that's what it triggered me when I knew a Barton was in the draft, and I also saw a mock draft somewhere that had Barton going to the Niners, and it could happen. I was like, what was a Barton? I remember that from back in the old days, but that's the one I was thinking about. All right, John, what about you? What did you notice in our mock?
Well, I think the 2 players that have been mentioned already, would be the 2 that would surprise me. I think some guys went, a guy like TJ Tampa going in the first round, I think it's very conceivable. I like him. He's our next best corner after those top 5 guys. But, kind of bumped an offensive lineman out of there. The Ravens, I think would take Graham Barton as a possibility as well, because of what their needs are. I mean, he's a kid that can do multiple things, and the Ravens love versatility in offensive linemen. So, but the one that really surprised me, and I have to echo Murphy, and the Cardinals could have taken him. That would have been an easy pick for the Cardinals other than Chop Robinson. And I was, right there with that pick, because he's, I think Newton is a slightly better pass rusher. And but the fact that the interior defenders have become so important now, I just think, I'll be surprised if he gets out of the first round. I definitely echo that. And, there's a couple down the line guys that could have gone there. We talked about the receiver Worthy, everybody's talking about. He is a potentially could be up in the first round as well. So, but the Mitchell was a good pick too. Harris Barton was the lineman, not Graham Barton. I just saw that. Yeah. Graham's the guy we're talking about now.
Yeah. Any chance Bo Nix gets drafted in the first round?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a chance. I mean, some teams will like him better than Penix. The injury factor with Penix is there. It's real. There's a medical report that comes out right before the draft, and they take a look at it. Because, there's a lot of guys that structurally look real good, but there's also some stuff they see on those MRIs that, hey, wait a minute, this guy might only play 5-6 years. I mean, I had a kid play for me that was tremendous. And they basically rejected him because he'd had, 2 surgeries and pins in his knee and all kinds of stuff. I don't know what Penix's medical is, but that could be a swap right there for, Bo Nix, as a result of that. So,
yeah. You would think there'd be a lot
it's
of GMs.
close between those two guys, as far as how they're ranked.
And the thing Nix has, as Penix does, which could be valuable, is the experience factor. And we've just seen that the last few years. Brock Purdy's for one. Doesn't matter where you get drafted. If you have experience in college football at quarterback, you could make waves in the NFL. Sometimes you talked about the inexperience from Drake Maye. Maybe that's going to work against him. It's very possible. So
take a look at Sean Payton, how he drafts quarterbacks and what he looks for. I mean, he's talking to some guys that are not necessarily, because they're going to take quarterback somewhere along the line. They're not necessarily the guys you would think. He's got a little different view of these things. I mean, he's a big. He wants him to play out of the pocket. So some of the quarterbacks that Sean's interviewed, it's going to be interesting to see if he takes one of those guys, before it's over. I know Pratt is a consideration. He's kind of got the Aiden O'Connell in him, does things well, processes well, not necessarily the spectacular creator that some of the guys that everybody's looking at are. So that's what Brock Purdy was. And he went, he was the last guy taken. He did a lot of things well, but not necessarily, is he the elite at everything. But smart, processes, and like you said, you don't know what you got till you get him in the building. Awful lot of flash in the pans and an awful lot of busts in the top 5 picks at quarterback.
Yeah, that's for sure. Last question before I wrap it up. No running backs taken in the first round. When do you think, Dave, when do you think the first running back will be taken, and who do you think that'll be?
I mean, somewhere in round 2. I think we could see 50 picks go by before we see a running back come off the board. And, I'm looking at Dallas in round 2 at 56 overall. That's where I feel like it's going to start. And I think once one comes off the board, you're going to see a handful within the next, 15 to 20 picks. I still think we'll see a good 5 or 6 come off on day 2, but I think it's going to be more towards the back half of the second round. And I mean, Dallas has almost nothing back there right now. And, if you told them right now, you get to pick your number 1 back in the class at that spot, I think they would run to the podium with that pick. And that could be Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson. I know we like Blake Corum and Jalen Wright. Any one of those 4 guys would fit in at the top of that spot. I don't think any of them stand out among each other, but they do have different skill sets. So based on who drafts them will dictate how they come off the board.
And by the way, if San Francisco, let's say they do decide to take a tight end with their first pick, who do you think is there a consensus number 2 tight end?
I mean, that's a tough call. I mean, Jatavian Sanders was the guy, but I mean, he's had a really rough pre-draft process. I do love the way he plays. He's very aggressive, but he just didn't test as well as someone would test to be drafted in the first round at tight end. I mean, the guy that I really did like that came on strong in 2023 and had a great workout is Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, but I don't see round 1 there. Theo Johnson, the guy from Penn State, has probably the highest ceiling player. Doesn't always look like he plays fast, but he's a great athlete. He's got the prototypical wide tight end size and frame. But a name that, Coop and I have gone back and forth on him. It's interesting to me who drafts him and what they do with him is Johnny Wilson from Florida State.
Absolutely.
Call him a tight end, call him a wide receiver, whatever. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter. He can line up in the slot, and Darren Waller is kind of like my comparison for him. And he's technically a tight end, but and he put his hand in the dirt. And I have some blocking tape on Johnny Wilson. The guy gets after it. He can play. He's got unbelievable length, like a rare level of arm length and wingspan. He can go up and get it. And some of the movement traits that I have an issue with him, I think they would pop up at wide receiver a little bit more than tight end. So that would be a surprise to many But if San Fran viewed him as a Jimmy Graham, Dan Waller type tight end, that could be a surprise pick at the end of the first round because he tested very well as well.
Yeah,
All
right. I see him more as a Swiss Army knife type receiver rather than a tight end because I don't see him that way. I see him as a guy that can play outside because of his length. He's got some things to work on for sure there. Too many drops, but in route running ability is not the best. But, as an inside big slot receiver that can also play outside can create nightmares for these teams that don't have a big nickel, especially if they want to match. So, and not everybody has Kyle Hamilton. So, I think of the Jets receiver. Oh, his name escapes me. We played for the Packers. Who's the big, tall drink of water?
Lazard.
Yeah, he's where the same mold. That type of player. Gave the Ravens fits. When they played them, when they didn't have their full complement when they played the Packers a couple of years ago. And I've watched him play a lot. When he was in Green Bay. So yeah, I see them using a guy like that. Eventually, he could be a tight end inside, but I think he's going to be a receiver. I think that's going to be whether he's a tight end or what you want to call him. He's a receiver. That's what they're going to use him for.
John, what are you up to right now between now and the draft? When are we going to see or hear from you next?
Well, I think Dave and I are starting to redo some of the videos, offense and defensive videos. I'm going to do some of those next week. Redo the safeties first. There's some changes. Some aren't. Some of the same players. They've just flipped them around a little bit. So we're going to redo those videos based on our top 5 that's on our website. So that's next. And we're on the radio quite a bit. So that's that's kind of what's going on. And I talked to some different people as well, around the league. But it's kind of nice right now. The guide is done. That's the big thing. It's going to be in the mail. It's got word that the bulk orders are going to be going out Friday. The rest of them are going out Monday. That means no delays this year. No scrambling, no heart attacks, nothing like that.
That's it. There you go.
So this looks like it's going a little smoother this year.
This was 2 years ago. This is 2022. Who's on the cover this year? Do we have 4 or 5 on the cover again?
Well,
you have to order to find out.
To find out.
Oh, and by the way, I suppose I can mention this. Go to the website, and there's a link that you can click on at the very top of the website. It's called, very simply, Buy Draft Guide. You click on that link, and you have a menu of things you can buy. You can get a digital edition, which is a little cheaper. A lot of people that are Ourlads supporters for years and years and years like to have that thing in their hands, like you just showed.
Yep.
So there's plenty of those available. You can order that. You can order the digital. You can order both, and also you can order the review, which comes out later on. So just click on that link, and it'll take you right to it. Oh, well, there it is. What do you know?
There it is. Once we get through with the ads, but there it is. Join the Ourlads
Draft
the Ourlads
Insiders.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, there they are. There they all are. There's the guy. That's terrific.
Don't forget, and
whoever decided to put that on there, that's a great job.
And don't forget the review guide either. This is next. This is what we work on next after the draft. Our work is never done, right, John?
Yeah, we can't review anything until after the draft. And then we like to see a little bit about how they do in the pro days. And
that would be nice. Yeah.
So we take a little time.
Give us some time out. Yeah. Dave, what are we going to see you doing?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of appearances in podcasts and radio shows leading up to. But I now that we have, as John said, now that the work has been sent in, that stress is off our plate. I try to get a little bit more active on Twitter, just interacting with followers and just getting different opinions from different teams, and just enjoying good conversation about the draft, because at the end of the day, none of us know what's going to happen. It's just fun to talk possibilities and what teams are really going to be looking for. And so I usually draft weekend will tweet out and just give a little short analysis on every pick. It starts to fall apart towards the end of the weekend, but early on, I'll definitely be very active. And as John said, I'll be putting out our consensus top 5 videos on our YouTube channel. A few are already out. We have a couple more to go.
Yeah, well, you and I we'll put out another video at some point before the draft. So we're going to work on that and probably go over your individual rankings like we did last year.
Okay,
which should be a lot of fun. Hayden, what are you up to? where can people find you here at Ourlads or anywhere else between now and the draft?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see me posting some videos just scattered around the page. You might have seen my video just a couple days ago on the top HBCU prospects. You'll see me making a few videos on some really, I don't want to call them under the radar type guys, but guys that maybe have draftable grades, maybe don't, and why I think they could excel at the next level. Things along those lines, just trying to find the real hidden gem. You know what I'm saying? Just looking forward to the draft coming up here. As you can imagine, love day 3 when you see those guys in the 6th, 7th round getting selected, and all the UDFAs, but really excited for the content over that 3-day period.
As we were putting the guide out, Hayden and I were talking a lot about those guys.
That's
towards
right.
the end. And then a few extra reports got done at the last minute as a result. But yeah, we've got the intriguing prospects too. That we'll continue with that probably a little bit. We don't want to give them all away. You got to buy the guide to see them all.
Yeah. But who should be the top prospect from that division?
From the HBCUs you're talking about?
Is there a consensus?
We had our highest grade on Willie Drew, a cornerback out of Virginia State. He was the only Division II guy that got invited to the combine. Excellent athlete. And you want to read the full report? Make sure you get the guide.
There you go. Check it out.
I
love
hate
it.
Great.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up. We will definitely have another mock draft at some point, at least one more between the draft. It'll be here before you know it. We're in April, so that's draft month. So, guys, appreciate it. Great job. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say between now and the draft. And then, as Jon said, we'll worry about after the draft. So
I'll play some golf.
Yeah, good idea. Let's head to Augusta. Why don't we do that in a few weeks? That would be nice. Anyway, we're out of here. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe here on the Ourlads Football channel, because this is where you get all of these great videos. We have so many more to come, both before and after the draft. You can hit that like button as well. And don't miss one of our videos, whether they're live or on demand. So I want to, again, thank everybody. Dave Syvertsen, Jon Cooper, Hayden Russell. I'm host Greg DePalma, and we will see you next time.